Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Merrimack School Board. We are hereby called to order this Tuesday, January 2nd. Would everyone please rise and join the board in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, at this point I'd like to entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes dated December 11th, 2006. Made by Jennifer, second. Second by Jody. Are there any clarifications, corrections, or amendments to said minutes? Rose?
Okay, we're talking about
the December 11th special budget meeting minutes.
Actually, no.
Jody?
On page 2, second paragraph from the top, I believe that was Patricia Koryansky, K-O-R-I-A-N-S-K-I, I believe. On page 3, third paragraph from the top, I think there's just a word missing under Superintendent Chaffrey, possibly replied or answered. Page 6, first paragraph, spelling of administrators' names. I just thought that was important. We spelled the names correctly. Fabrizio is spelled incorrectly. Page 8, I believe, let's see, second paragraph down, I believe it's Colleen Welch.
I'm sorry, Jody, where are you?
Colleen, the second paragraph down,
On 8?
assistant principal at the middle school. Yes, page 8.
Yes.
And then again on page 9, second paragraph down, second sentence, Ms. Welch. And that's all I found on December 11th.
Actually, I did have one on December 11th.
Rose?
On page 8, in the first paragraph, about halfway down, it said, he noted if the program is cut. I'm guessing it should be, he noted if the program is cut. We want to make that change.
Okay, so correct the typo, it, if it would be.
If.
If it. Further? If I can request, on the first page under the call to order, I'd like clarification to the first sentence. The meeting was called to order at 6:40 p.m. following video difficulties. On the second page, I'd like reconsideration. I couldn't locate the email, but the second paragraph from the end, Brad Salt, I believe that that gentleman's name is misspelled. I don't believe his last name was Salt. And on page 5, I'd like to request clarification in the last paragraph. It currently reads, Chairman Coburn questioned whether the Mastercola Elementary School paraeducators are shared with Thorntons Ferry and Reeds Ferry schools. I don't believe that that was the phrasing that I used. The intent would be, Chairman Coburn requested whether the Mastercola Elementary School paraeducators are shared, Chairman Coburn questioned whether whether the paraeducators are shared among classrooms at Thorntons Ferry Elementary and Reeds Ferry Elementary as they are at MES. The intent was to see if the paraeducators were shared among classrooms, not at all among buildings. Further clarification, corrections? Jody?
Another on page 5, under elementary schools, Kathy Custer, I believe Kathy Custer spells her first name with an I.
Further questions, clarification, considerations? If I can add again on page 5 then, the top paragraph, the third sentence, these are more used by the teachers to prepare less than by the students. Could we change less to rather, used by teachers to prepare rather than by the students, just for clarification, not that the teachers are preparing a smaller amount. Further clarifications, corrections, amendments? Seeing none, we'll put the question to the vote. All those in favor of approving the December 11th minutes as corrected, so signify by saying aye. Aye. Those in opposition? Abstention? Motion carries 401. Board Member Markwell in abstention. At this time, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes dated December 13th. So made by Rose, second by Jody. Any clarification, corrections, or amendment to said minutes? Jody?
On page 5, 3rd, comment down from the top, I believe that was Laura Ochoa, O-C-H-O-A. And then on page 7, 3rd paragraph down, Board Member Thornton noted, I believe that was Board Member Valancourt. And that's all I was able to find.
Okay. Further clarification, correction, or amendments? If I could, on the first page, under call to order, I would again request that we amend the first line. The meeting was called to order by Chairman Coburn at 6:40 p.m. following technical difficulties. On page 8, typographical error in the first full paragraph, beginning Vice Chairman Robertson Smith questioned how the school will be different, ENT, rather than difference, as it appears. On page 9 of 10, on page 9, the third paragraph, could we, in the second sentence, just insert the word that? She noted that the pre-registration could be done. And again, in the fifth paragraph, clarification, Vice Chairman Robertson Smith questioned the proposed $15,000 cut in athletics. Assistant Principal Peter Bergeron noted that this was done by cutting a supply and reconditioning accounts. Could we make that read by cutting supplies, omitting the word a, and reconditioning accounts? On page 10, the second paragraph, second sentence from the end, Mr. Johnson noted that he does not want to offer an elected and then drop the course. Please change that to read elective, T-I-V-E. On page 11, under the first paragraph, Board Member Thornton questioned whether the $3,000 for the transportation cost would need to be raised also. Point of clarification, Jennifer, was that $3,000 or $5,000 that had been questioned? It was 3? Okay. Earlier in the minutes, it had said 5 from Principal McGill, so I just wanted to address the consistency. Final paragraph on page 11, second to last full sentence, Chairman Coburn noted that the music department is operating on a model similar to the time when there were 3 grades at the middle school. If we could correct that from classes, they have far more than 3 classes. Jody?
Just wanted to speak to your clarification. The $5,000 was the dollar amount that was included in the budget for the program, but the $3,000 was also was a cost for just the transportation alone, that we had some discussion about whether we wanted to add in the $3,000 for the transportation also.
Okay.
So as it's stated, it is correct.
Okay. Further correction, clarification, or amendments? Seeing none, we'll put the question to the vote for approval of the minutes dated December 13th, 2006. All those in favor, so signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? Abstention? Motion carries 401. Board Member Markwell recorded in abstention. I'd like to entertain a motion for the approval of the public meeting minutes dated December 18th, 2006. Made by Jody, second by Rose. Any corrections, clarification, or amendment to said minutes? Rose?
On page 1, under public participation, under Representative Hinkle, in the second sentence.
Rose, is your mic on?
Oh, no, it isn't. In the second sentence, It says, in the House of Representative. I believe House of Representative needs to be capitalized, and it should be representatives.
Plural. Thank you.
Plural. And, okay, I think that was the only, okay.
Further clarification? Jody?
I have a question. I didn't have the time to go back to my handwritten notes, but on page 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth down, Kathy, 30 Craig Drive, was that Kathy Sasser? Or was that Kathy Rask?
I don't believe so.
All
I
right.
know that Kathy
I
Sasser's daughter
didn't
spoke, but I
remember
didn't
having a
have.
Rask. Okay. Page 3, under Serena Caesar, the address was 3 Woodland Drive. And again, on page 4, Mr. Fabrizio's last name is spelled incorrectly. And I believe that was it.
Further clarification or correction to said minutes? I'd like to request a clarification under item number 3 on page 1. It currently states Chairman Coburn represented Representative Hinkle this evening. I would like that to be amended to read, Chairman Coburn noted she received an informal request from Representative Hinkle this evening to address the impact of the budget cuts and proposed legislation, and extended him the courtesy of speaking in public participation. On page 2, I'd like clarification on the third full paragraph. Laureen Allen noted the board needs information on student needs and data, not that the board needs student needs and data. On that second page, again, I'd like clarification, or correction of a typo. The second to last paragraph, Angela Kazazian of 9 Hansom Drive. It's Hansom, I believe. On page 3, second full paragraph, Chairman Coburn noted a position from Patrice Becker with 236 signatures. On page 4, to further clarify what Jody had pointed out, not only the misspelling of Mr. Fabrizio's name, but could we add consistency, please? Mastrocola Elementary School Assistant Principal John Fabrizio noted that the 5 strands of the curriculum are civics, and so on. On page 5, under item number 7, Energy Management, I'd like to request a clarification, just for ease in reading the minutes. In the second full paragraph under item 7, could we add something to the effect of Chairman Coburn stood corrected? Mr. Lucy has completed review of all buildings. The last paragraph on page 5, I'd like to see a correction of a typographical error. There's a proposal to upgrade the lighting systems in the buildings. There's a significant utility rebate to finance a portion of this upgrade, not financial. On page 6, very first sentence, water conservation upgrades includes, could we delete the S to make it read upgrades include upgrading sinks? On the last paragraph of the page, again, I request consistency and clarification. Vice Chairman Robertson Smith noted her concern for the current air quality. She asked if this was monitored, and correct that to read as a statement rather than a fragmented question. On page number 7, in the 5th full paragraph, I believe the intent here, Chairman Coburn noted the next step is to create a subcommittee to meet with Maintenance Director Shirley LeMay and a representative with Honeywell, or to meet as a board and for public information, and meet for public information or public hearings. I believe that was the intent. In the third paragraph from the end on page 7, I'd like to have the rephrase, again for consistency as with the second previous question, change the fragmented question, rephrase it. Board Member Coburn asked about the timelines for the filing of warrant articles, and again make that a statement. On page number 8, under item number 8, the second full paragraph, could we have a definition of what the acronym RFP stands for? It appears that the American History Grant will also come to the district's elementary schools. The RFP has just come out. Debbie, what does RFP stand for?
Request for proposals.
Okay. And finally, on page 10, could we have clarification in the second full paragraph? Chairman Coburn noted that she received a letter from the current chairman of the, not budget school, but school budget committee. Further correction, clarification, or amendments to said minutes? Seeing none, we'll put the question to a vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes dated December 18th as amended, so signify by saying aye. Aye. All those in opposition? Abstentions? Motion carries 3-0-2 with board members Thornton and Markwell voting in abstention. Okay, the last of our 4 sets of minutes. Could I have a motion for the approval of the minutes dated December 20th, 2006? Made by Jody, second by Rose. Are there any corrections, clarification, or amendments to said minutes? Rose?
On page 11, the second paragraph down, where it says Vice Chair Robertson Smith, the second sentence, she noted that she does not want to support raising class sizes. I think, to be struck, want to, she noted she does not support raising class sizes.
Okay. Further corrections, clarification, or amendment? Jody?
The typo on page 1, under tour of areas for asbestos removal, second paragraph. The least expensive option would be to remove the tiles instead of files.
Any further? On page 1 of said minutes, I would like to again request a clarification. Under call to order, could we add a statement to the effect that, noting audio difficulties, the evening's agenda was reconfigured to tour the high school while microphones were addressed, or operation of the microphones were addressed? Again, on page 1, third paragraph from the bottom, Business Administrator Chevnell noted that the project will occur over 1 or 2 summers versus it will last over 1 or 2 summers. On page 2, I'd like to request clarification. In the second full paragraph, Business Administrator Chevnell noted that if the asbestos is friable, it must be removed. He noted this is the best solution. He noted that if money is put into the budget for the $50,000 portion of the project, and a warrant article is on the ballot, so that we have an addition there that clarifies the intent. On page 4, fourth paragraph from the end, I'd like to request address of a typographical error. Royce Swanger noted this budget is an exercise driven, D-R-I-V-E-N, by level funding, not driving. On page 5, last paragraph on the page, I'd like to address the typographical error that affects the intent here. Mr. St. Jean noted that about 16 of 100, or 16%, I believe that the verbiage that he used at that time was that he said it was 1.6 in 10, but definitely 16 out of 100 is not 1.6%. Either of those would be acceptable. On page 6, I'd like to request clarification on the first full paragraph. It speaks to Mr. St. Jean, noting that typically services offered in the summer are to maintain skills learned through the traditional school year. I'd like to request amendment or clarification there to add, and are only offered through IEPs where retention of learning is critical. A second item on that page, second paragraph on page 6, second sentence, Mr. St. Jean noted that the learning resource specialist evaluates, change the typo from evaluations to evaluates. In that same paragraph, the next line down, please add the words, the district is required to complete evaluations within 45 days of a referral. Additionally, in the fourth paragraph on page 6, Vice Chairman Robertson Smith questioned the percentage of reimbursement. Fix the typo to change it from reimbursed to reimbursement. On page 7, again, a typo under central office. In the 7th line down, the early retirement account represents, please add an S to represent. On page 8, under warrant articles, I'd like a point of clarification here. Business Administrator Chevnell noted the board should expect to see a warrant article for $8,000 to be put into the Paving Capital Reserve Fund. I believe that Business Administrator Chevnell indicated it would be a $50,000 warrant article, not an $8,000. If we can address that error. And finally, on page 11, third paragraph from the end, the Budget Committee will hold meetings on January 10th, 22nd, and it again reads January 22nd. The second one should read the 31st with a public hearing. Any further clarification, correction, or amendments? Seeing none, we'll put the minutes to a vote. All those in favor of the approval of the minutes dated December 20th as amended, so signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? Abstention? George, are you abstaining? Okay. Motion carries 3-0-2. Board members Thornton and Markwell voting in abstention. Okay. Thank you for your patience through that. At this point in our meeting, we will open the floor to public participation. This is an opportunity for members of the public to raise issues, provide information, or state personal positions for the record. We ask that when approaching the microphone, you state your name, address, and any group you represent while adhering to the written guidelines that appear on the back of tonight's agenda. Seeing no participation, we will close public participation. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted? So made by Jennifer, second? By Jody? Debbie, would you please read the consent agenda this evening?
Yes, I have Jeffrey Capone being nominated for videography teacher at Merrimack High School. You may remember that Jeff Capone was at Merrimack High School last year.
Also on the consent agenda this evening, we do have approval of the K-12 social studies curriculum and the approval of the 3 updated policies for review. Is there any comment or discussion to come before the board on the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll put the consent agenda to a vote. All those in favor so signify by saying aye. Opposition? Abstention? Motion carries 5-0-0. At this point in our agenda, we will welcome to the table Mr. Stephen Williams, Executive Director of the National Regional Planning Commission. As a representative, he is going to discuss with us upcoming issues in our region. He has also requested that, not as board members, but as citizens, we complete a survey for him. The surveys will also be made available to members of the public in our audience this evening, again, for some input and background information. Welcome. Very good.
You can be looking at them as I'm introducing myself to you to grab on these things.
And if you would just toggle the mic up.
Good evening. As the chair mentioned, my name is Steve Williams. I'm the Executive Director of the Nashua Regional Planning Commission. I also happen to be a Merrimack resident, and so didn't have a long drive this evening, and am happy to be here. I actually have 2 children. who attends school in the district, a daughter who attends the middle school, and a son who attends here in the high school. And my wife and I and our family have lived here in Merrimack for 5 years, and we've been very pleased with the Merrimack School District and have really appreciated all the efforts of the school board and of the staff. We think that our children are receiving an excellent education here, and I just want to take the opportunity to thank you this evening. What I'm here to talk to you about this evening is that the Nashua Regional Planning Commission is undertaking the development of what we call a regional plan for the Nashua region. And I actually did a brief discussion of this in December in a forum where the superintendent heard me, and I think she was very interested in that and asked me if I would come and talk to you this evening. We're trying to get out in front of as many different groups of people of different types, citizen groups, elected boards, all types of different groups over the course of the next several months to get input with regard to issues that are going to be affecting the Nashua region in the next 20 years or so. Just kind of by way of introduction to Nashua Regional Planning Commission, because I know we rarely actually come before the school board. The Nashua Regional Planning Commission is an organization, a regional planning commission that is chartered under the state law to serve the planning needs of 12 communities in southern New Hampshire. We consider ourselves a leader in innovative planning strategies that preserve and improve the quality of life in southern New Hampshire. We were created in 1970. We focus on a variety of different areas: comprehensive local land use planning, transportation, and also regional planning issues related to the environment, air quality, water quality, household hazardous waste, and brownfields. We also offer cutting-edge services in the area of mapping and data services, and we specialize in the ability to collaborate with multiple parties and bring multiple parties together in cooperative relationships to do planning that results in innovative, inclusive, technically sound processes and is driven by open public participation. In this past year, we were the winner of the Outstanding Plan Award for the region-wide build-out analysis from the Northern New England chapter of the American Planning Association. The communities that we serve are shown on the map. As you can see, Nashua and Merrimack are really sort of the heart of the region. We have 3 communities east of the river: Litchfield, Hudson, Pelham, and then 7 more communities west of here: Amherst, Hollis, Mount Vernon, Milford, Brookline, Lineborough, and Wilton. We're trying to answer 5 key questions for the Nashua region at this point, and I'll just run through these real quickly. First, we're trying to figure out where the Nashua region stands at this point and where it's going to be going in the next 20 years. We're also trying to determine the most important issues that the folks in the region think that we're going to be facing in the next 20 years, and how which of those issues can we impact as a region. Obviously, there are some issues that we have no ability to impact as a region. For instance, the price of gas, things like that may bother us, may be of serious concern, but there's very little that we can actually do about that even as a region. Next, the fourth, we're trying to identify some strategies that can be used to address those issues. And finally, we're trying to figure out how we can work together as citizens and municipalities in southern New Hampshire to try to implement those strategies. Our regional plan, we have a statewide mandate behind this plan. We're required to prepare this plan and adopt it by October of 2007. Our timeline is that we've actually done quite a bit of background research and data analysis in the past year. During the course of January and February, as I mentioned, we're going to be going out to a variety of public forums to get public input. We're also going to be holding some regional public input meetings. During March, we're going to be holding an input session, sort of a mini retreat with our NRPC commissioners, and there are 4 commissioners from Merrimack that represent the community on our board. In April and May, we're going to be holding some more regional public meetings. Then in June and July, we're going to be focusing on actually developing the written document. In August and September, we're going to be compiling the document and putting it out for review, and ultimately we hope to be adopting it at our September meeting. One of the important aspects of this is the public input survey that I passed out to you a few minutes ago. The question that we're trying to answer here is, how important will these types of issues be in the coming years? Issues related to the people of Southern New Hampshire, the government of Southern New Hampshire, the economy, transportation, housing, and natural resources. As I mentioned, we've done quite a bit of work to date with regard to analyzing growth trends and current conditions, and we've also completed a region-wide build-out impact analysis, which I'm going to be talking to you about here in just a moment. Some background with regard to where the region has been. We've seen 40 years of rapid growth, which is primarily, we believe, been driven by our proximity to the Boston metropolitan area. In 1960, as you can see, there were only 63,000 people in this region, and it was, with the exception probably of Nashua, a very rural region. In 2000, our population had climbed to just over 195,000, and we believe today the population of the region is close to 210,000. That's a 210% increase over the course of that 40-year period, and that averages out to about a 33% average growth rate for every decade in the last 40 years. This is sort of a visual aid to the way growth has taken place in the NRPC region right here, and also in sort of the broader Boston metropolitan area, going out to the west as far as Worcester, and then all over southern New Hampshire. And so this is actually an animation that I'm going to play for you. And what this illustrates is the growth rates that have been experienced in different communities in this area in each 10-year period, starting in 1930. Proceeding to 2000, the last year for which we have census data, and then we have forecast data that's been prepared for the 2000 to 2010 period and the 2010 to 2020 period. Just to kind of give you a little more introduction to this, anything that's shaded gray is an indication that there was actually a falling population, that the population is declining, and then the colored shades, the more intense the color, the faster the growth rate. And so all the way down here, we're looking at just a growth rate of under 5% over the course of a 10-year period. Up here, we're looking at growth rates in excess of 100%. And so when we play this, what you can see is that there's almost a wave that moves out from the Boston metropolitan area starting in about 1950, and that wave had actually passed through the Nashua region in the 60s, 70s, and to a lesser extent in the 80s. So let me play that again for you, and you can take another look at that. There's 1950 to 60. And then you can see how it kind of dissipates off to the north. And so if you look in 60 to 70 here, let's actually go down here and do that one. That 60 to 70 period was actually the highest growth period in the region. As you can see, there was relatively rapid growth taking place in what we call the 495 belt today, but you can see actually that the greatest growth was taking place up here in southern New Hampshire, particularly in Merrimack, in Amherst, over here in Pelham, and then also in Salem and Windham and in Londonderry. If we look just at Merrimack as an example here, you can see that spike in the center there, it represents the 1960 to 1970 period. During that 10-year period, Merrimack experienced a growth rate of 188%. And as you can see, growth is significantly lower today, with a growth rate from 1990 to 2000 of just 13%, and then forecast for Merrimack of 15% growth between 2000 and 2010, and then 12% growth between 2010 and 2020. So clearly, quite a bit of growth has taken place in the region. The interesting thing from our point of view is that if you come all the way out here to the last period, actually the forecast period from 2010 to 2020, you can see that most of that growth that has been so intense in recent years here in southern New Hampshire is actually forecast to be over. And we're looking at relatively slow growth rates over the course of the next 20-year period. And actually in the Boston area, they're looking at population decline over the course of the next 20-year period. Literally, the Boston metropolitan area is hollowing out. One of the things that I didn't mention earlier is that of all the growth in that entire area that you see, 50% of the growth that's taken place in that area in the past 40 years has been in southern New Hampshire. And so clearly we are the growing edge of the Boston metropolitan area. Let's see here. Okay, the impacts of growth I think we can all identify in our region. It impacts our natural resources. We lose open space. We have increased water demand. We generate increased amounts of solid waste. We also have public service impacts. Obviously, you all are familiar with the impacts that growth have on the schools, but at the same time, we also have impacts in terms of increased demand for emergency services, increased cost for maintaining roads and facilities, and a number of other types of impacts. This is a quote from our build-out impact analysis that I think is very appropriate. Effective land use planning with a long-term goal of sustainability is essential to confront the pressures of development growth. So build-out, I've made a number of references to build-out. Build-out is sort of a theoretical condition that exists when all the land that is available and suitable for residential or non-residential construction has been developed. It represents sort of the carrying capacity of the region, and it provides an estimate of the type and amount and location of future growth in the region. Our build-out impact analysis focused on determining the impact of build-out on housing, population, non-residential uses that resulted in employment, square footage of different types of uses, the number of students that are going to be generated at build-out, the traffic, the water demand, the wastewater that would be generated, and the emergency services that would be required. Our goal here was to provide policymakers like you and members of the public with information needed to make informed choices regarding future growth in the region. Just to summarize, we're expecting about a 30% increase between now and ultimate build-out in the number of housing units in the region. This represents an increase of about 22,000 new housing units, with 82% of those being new single-family housing units. We're expecting a 32% increase in population, from an estimated population in 2003 of just under 203,000 up to a forecast of 267,000 people at build-out. We're expecting a 71% increase in non-residential uses. These would be commercial uses, office buildings, industrial facilities, and other things like that. With over 2,000 new non-residential lots, we're expecting there will be 43,000 more automobiles in the region at build-out, and so you can imagine that on 101A on a Saturday afternoon, you're going to have an additional 43,000 vehicles in front of you as you're trying to get to Target or to Walmart. And then region-wide, we're expecting an additional about 11,000 public school students throughout the region. We're expecting that 12% of our region's roads will be over capacity, meaning that for at least part of the day, they will be experiencing congestion, slowdowns, increased accident rates, etc. We're expecting an increase in water demand in the region of about 7.3 million gallons per day. We were using about 28.3 million gallons per day in 2003, and we expect to be requiring about 35.6 million gallons per day of water at build-out. We're expecting to generate about 23,462 tons of additional solid waste per year, an additional almost 94,000 police calls in the region, and almost 6,000 additional fire and emergency response calls. In Merrimack, the numbers are actually fairly similar. we're expecting an increase of about 1,833 additional dwelling units. Again, most of those would be single-family dwelling units. We're expecting our population to increase by just about 6,000 people. Our population, according to the 2000 census, was 26,394. We're expecting that by the year 2010, our population will be up to just short of 29,000 here in Merrimack, and by 2020, it will be nearly at build-out, which will be about 32,350 people. We're expecting a 26% increase in commercial, retail, or service space, and yes, this does include the outlet mall. We're expecting similarly a 25% increase in office space and a 25% increase in developed industrial space in the community. And just for your information, all of this data was developed in cooperation with the Merrimack Community Development Department. And so this represents the policies that are in place today as they understand them. So why does it matter? You know, why does all of this stuff matter? Well, we believe it matters because we think the 12 communities of the Nashua region represent a unique collection of communities, from the very large, you know, Nashua, the second largest community in the state, all the way down to the very small, which in our case is Lineborough, and that each of those communities, be it Nashua or Lineborough or Merrimack or Hudson or any of the rest of them, make a contribution to the quality of life of the region. Each of them are unique, and each of them both have something to contribute to the overall region and have things that they need from the overall region. And our concern is that if we do not plan properly for the growth that we expect to take place, either in terms of the impacts it's going to have on services like schools or solid waste or water or traffic, or in terms of how those housing units are going to be developed or how those new retail uses are going to be located, we think that the quality of life in the region will change, and probably change for the worse. And so what we're trying to do is go out to folks like yourselves who are not only elected officials but also concerned citizens of the region and ask you what the issues are that you're most concerned about and what you think we need to be focusing our attention on, both in terms of what we need to be trying to prevent because you think it might be bad, or what you think we might want to be accentuating because you think it might be good. Just a little rundown on what we're going to be doing from here. In January and February, we're going to be holding some public meetings. As I mentioned, there are going to be 3 of those major meetings. One's going to be located over in Hudson, one will be located in Nashua, and one will be out in Milford. In April and May, we'll be going back out to the public to talk about strategies for addressing some of the key issues. We're asking you this evening to give us your opinion on the critical issues survey that I distributed a few minutes ago, and then give us some recommendations as we go through this process to help us figure out how to implement plan recommendations. And then if you have any questions or concerns or want to talk about these issues further, I'd certainly encourage you to give me a call or send me an email at Nashua Regional Planning Commission. I'd be happy to interact with you further on any of these issues. So I think that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that members of the board might have for me this evening.
Thank you. Rose?
You mentioned that there are 4 commissioners from Merrimack. Who would those 4 people be?
Nelson Disco, the chair of the planning board, and he is also our treasurer and a member of our executive committee. Don Wunderlich. Let me see here. You would ask me an awkward question like that. I hope they're not watching on TV. Don Wunderlich, Ron. I'm sorry. I can email your superintendent the names, and she can pass those along to you. But right off the top of my head, I'm sorry that I can't remember.
Just in case someone wanted to get in contact with them to give them some information.
Sure.
About.
Sure, I understand. Yeah, I'd be happy to pass those along to you.
Further question? Jody?
Thank you very much for coming here tonight. It's always fascinating when we talk about projection. in relation to what Rose brought up about the commissioners, when you said that you take input in March, I believe it was, when you hear from the commissioners.
Right.
Could you just explain to me a little bit the details about what you're talking about, what
Sure.
kind of information you get, and possibly where they obtain that information from prior to passing it on to you?
Sure. Well, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going out and doing a lot of public outreach meetings, similar to what we're really doing here this evening. You actually, I hate to tell you this, but you're sort of the beta test for our outreach process. This is the first of our outreach meetings and our first use of this survey, and so I'd be happy to hear any comments you might have on either the presentation or the survey. But we'll be going out to a lot of different groups with the survey and with the presentation to present the data, talk to them about the issues. We hope that they'll be providing us their input using the survey form, and then we have some data that we're working on developing that's really just straight data analysis, similar to what you saw up here, but more detailed, that we'll be providing to them. We'll also be providing to them a summary of all the input we receive from the surveys, and they'll be using that to identify the issues that they think are the most important and to start strategizing about approaches that we can take to deal with those issues as 12 communities in the region.
So the commissioners are going to, our commissioners for Merrimack, say, would be attending these public outreach meetings?
That's right. That's right. They will not, they're going to be invited to the public outreach meetings, but we're going to be providing them with summaries of all the input that we receive in the course of the public outreach meetings.
Further questions? Jennifer?
I'm just wondering if this information is available on your website.
We are going to be posting the information on the website. Is the presentation up on the website yet, Jill? Okay, yes, we're going to be putting that up on the website later this week, and I think we're putting the survey form online as well, right?
Good. You've got some really good information there, and it kind of went by so fast. I didn't have time to get it all, so I wanted
Sure.
to take a look at it again. Thank
Sure.
you.
George?
A lot of our data is showing that population is actually going to decline. We're showing, in our school data, we're showing a decrease or a tendency for a decrease in students. In the period that you said we were going to increase, approximately 30%, I think the number was.
All right.
That kind of contradicts everything we have right now. Where is that information coming from?
What we did there is we looked at the historical trend for each community in terms of the number of students per, number of public school students, I should say, per housing unit in the community. And so we looked at data from 2000 and 1990 to determine the rate for the number of students that were being generated per housing unit, and then we applied that rate into the future to the number of housing units that we expect to have in the community in the future years.
I think your numbers might be off a little bit, because based on some other data I've seen, number of new births is down significantly in this region, whereas in other areas it has gone up for various different reasons.
Sure.
But I think that data might be a little off now at this point.
Okay, good, thank you.
George, what I think you'll find interesting, too, is in our next board meeting, we have asked representatives from NASDAQ, who did the demographic study, to come before us, and really, I think that this will just layer nicely for us. No one can argue that we are still building homes in Merrimack, and the impact on the demographics or the projection can only be reliable. Right now, we're at our second year of the implementation of that demographic study. We're really only accurate for another 3 years out. Any year after that fifth year is merely speculation or like throwing darts at a board. So I think it'll be interesting to see how the two sets of statistics or projections overlay. But I do think that it's fascinating, and to have the information that deals with build-out and really to define it and to look at the region as a whole is something that I know that I haven't considered before. We certainly tend to compartmentalize and think just about Merrimack, but the implications for the region itself are quite grand.
Yes.
Further questions or comments? If I might ask, Steve, in October of '07, you're projecting an implementation. What authority does the Regional Planning Commission hold over implementation? Or, I mean, is it advisory in capacity? Or
The Regional Planning Commission is advisory in capacity. We don't have any authority in and of ourselves. The powers, so to speak, that we have in terms of implementation is based purely on our ability to get the municipalities of the region to come together and work in a cooperative fashion on these issues. And so what we're hoping to do through this process is identify the highest priority issues, the ones that people are most concerned about, and identify strategies on which the municipalities of the region are in general agreement, so that they can then be ready to come together and start working on those in a joint fashion. So we really work as sort of a convening organization, a facilitating organization, some would say an early warning system to provide sort of background and to give the municipalities a look at the big picture, because what you mentioned earlier applies to all of them. They often tend to focus on their own issues within their own municipality and on a relatively short time frame, rather than looking at the big picture and region-wide and the long time frame.
Thank you. Further questions or discussion from the board? Well, I thank you very much for coming before us this evening, Mr.
Okay.
Williams. Your presentation was very informative and helpful to the board.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I hope I have the opportunity to come back some other time.
Very good. Thank you again. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a traffic signal warrant analysis. You'll remember that when we had proposed a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, the Town Council, two items were brought to the table. One was the sewer line at Merrimack Middle School, and the second is the traffic signal that appears at the Babusick Lake intersection with Madeline Bennett Road. Matthew, would you speak to the traffic signal analysis, please?
Thank you. This is for your information. The town of Merrimack has requested that we perform a traffic signal warrant analysis. In order to have the light be authorized to write tickets on by the police department, it has to be accepted by the town of Merrimack Board of Selectmen, Town Council, I should say. In order for it to be accepted by the town council, it needs to be recommended by the Public Works Department. Public Works Department wasn't going to recommend it unless we did a traffic signal warrant analysis that proves that this signal is warranted and is legal as far as the town is concerned. So we hired Bob Bollinger, who was the original engineer with Steve Perno back years ago, who performed the traffic study and the traffic survey, to go out there and to actually count cars, count pedestrians. As you can see, it's unfortunate that most of the packets didn't arrive on time. It is quite a lengthy report. But on page 1 of his study says, a review of the analysis completed as part of this assessment indicates that traffic signal control at the intersection of Babusick Lake Road and McQuestion Road and Madeline Bennett Lane is justified based on existing traffic volumes. Specifically, on page 7, there are 8 warrants. I won't read them all off, but it meets warrant number 3, which is the peak hour vehicular volume. When it met that, it was passed the signal warrant analysis. So I'm going to be taking this document, forwarding to the Town of Merrimack Public Works Department, the town manager, for their review, and hopefully they will recommend acceptance of the traffic signal to the town council.
Questions or discussion from the board? George?
Matt, first thing that jumps out to me is that the only thing that did pass on that, and again, I haven't had a chance to read this, so I don't understand it fully. Peak hour vehicular volume is the only one that passed, but yet school crossing is listed as no.
The school crossing warrant means that you have to have 25 or more school children use that intersection during the arrival or dismissal time. At that particular day, there weren't 25 kids walking through that intersection. Over the course of the entire day, there were probably 25, 26 people, but during the arrival and dismissal time, there weren't 25, so that's why it didn't meet it. If it was a day, springtime, nicer weather, I'm sure we would have had the 25 kids, but just because of the climate and the conditions, we didn't have them at that time.
So you only need one to make the light warranted.
Correct.
What was the cost of this?
$2,900.
Thank you.
Further discussion from the board? Jody?
My question was going to be what happens next, and Matt pretty much answered that for me, but as I've said again, all you've really had to do is participate in entering or trying to exit that intersection when it's dismissal or arrival time. And I did it prior to I dropped my daughter off every single day, and it was early for band too. It wasn't the normal amount of, the normal arrival time. It was an early arrival for her. Without that traffic signal, I was very, very concerned that there was going to be an accident. I can't stress enough how important I think having that traffic signal is at that intersection.
I agree. From a common sense standpoint, you can look at it and go through it, and you can just see the justification for the need of it. However, this was just something that needed to be done for liability reasons, for acceptance, for the town to meet their criteria.
And I think interestingly, too, what I've learned from the historical perspective of this is as the new school was proposed and went through the planning board, there were really 4 options for that intersection, the traffic light being only one of the options. They could have kept the 4-way stop signs there or added an additional one at Madeline Bennett Lane. Adding a rotary or a roundabout there was one of the other possibilities that was considered, as well as, I believe, using a traffic safety officer there to conduct traffic at peak hours like they do down at the end of Turkey Hill and Amherst Road. I think that this is probably a very, for the reasons that Jody points out, a very wise call. It's a safety issue. In this packet of information, too, I can't locate it right now, but I'm very concerned about the speed of people. Even with a traffic signal there, coming southbound on Babusick Lake Road, which would have been north of Marty Drive, which I picture as being on the farmhouse curve just south of Bean Road, car was going 55 miles an hour. 40 cars were observed, the highest going 55 miles an hour, and the slowest one, I believe, going 34, and the road is slated for 30 miles per hour. So just having a signal that requires that people stop and are considerate about being near a school situation, I think is, a very good measure for the school district to have. Certainly if the town council would be in receipt of this information and, see that one of the warrants is definitely met per request, I think that they should certainly accept the light without any further difficulty or delay. Jody?
I just wanted to echo your sentiment also, Emily. When I went through that and I noticed the average rate of speed, it was kind of striking to me. It is a 30-mile-an-hour zone, and I think the average was 44 miles an hour for the cars that travel through there. So that was an eye-opener for me.
Yeah, that was a comment that Mr. Bollinger made to me personally, that he was very surprised at the rate of speed. And you recall, before that intersection, we had the traffic light. It was much less of a T configuration, so you could even go faster if you were coming from this location all the way to Babusick Lake Road where it hits 101. You could make that curve at an amazing rate of speed. So I think we've improved it quite considerably.
Mm-hmm. Further question, comment? Jennifer?
Matt, did we only need to meet one of those warrants? Is that what was required by the town? Are they looking for more?
Yes, we only had to meet one.
Okay, thank you.
Further question? I'll point out to the board that on page 10 of the documentation, under the conclusions and recommendations, in the end of the first paragraph, Mr. Bollinger does point out that specifically warrant 3, the peak traffic hour volumes, is satisfied under the 2006 average month conditions. But in the second paragraph, an equally important assertion is made. It regards the implementation of a 2-phase signal sequence. It had originally been proposed in July 2004 and would result in significantly less delay at the intersection with improved LOS, which I believe to be level of service. He recommends that accordingly, consideration should be given to returning signal operation at this location to the preferential phasing sequence recommended by VAI in 2004. So I think that that is something also to bring to the attention of the Town Council and the Department of Public Works.
If I can elaborate, seeing you brought it up, the original design by Vanessa Associates and approved by the town back then and approved by the town's consultant engineer, I think it was Dufresne and Henry, which is now TEP Engineering, had a signal scheme that east and west would get the green at the same time, north and south would get the green at the same time. The town's consultant engineer, Nick Darchek, changed the phasing in the field to only allow west getting the green, with east being the red, and it was just kind of like one road at a time gets the green, not two roads at a time. So that's something that Bob Bollinger just put in the report to recommend that they take a look at it again to make traffic flow better.
Jennifer?
Just to add on to that, is that why there's such a huge backup going towards like the Amherst, going like straight through from Equestrian onto Babusick Lake? At 5 o'clock, it's...
McQuestion going
Yeah.
north, yes, that's correct, because the other traffic going south gets the
They
green.
have the right
You
way.
going north have a red.
So you're going
You
one-
can't move together.
You're all going one at a time.
Right.
And in the
Okay.
morning, Jennifer, it backs up in the opposite direction, all the way up to Marty Drive.
Way back, right?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Thank you.
So that timing would certainly help in that area. Further questions? Seeing none, Matthew, thank you for your explanation and covering this topic for us. Next item on our agenda this evening is the draft warrant articles for the 2007 warrant. And Matt, you're on deck again.
Okay, thank you. We have 4 warrant articles here for your consideration, kind of closely paralleling our previous discussions. The first article we have for consideration is a roof reconstruction capital reserve fund. In the capital improvement plan, we have in 0809, $150,000 slated for Mastrocola Elementary School, and in 2011-2012, we have another $250,000 slated for Reeds. These are repairs to roofs. Currently, we only have $250,000, so we'll be able to do fully the MES project, but we'll be short come 2011-2012 to do the Reeds Ferry project. This warrant article makes a deposit into the capital reserve fund of $50,000 or 20% of the unencumbered surplus funds remaining at the end of the year, whichever is less. We use 20% figure for 3 of the warrant articles here. What that's going to do is if you have $1 million surplus, it's only going to take 60% of the surplus and guarantee that you give at least 40 back. If we don't have these warrant articles, just to kind of stress that point again, all our surplus goes back to reduced taxes. We don't have the authority to retain any surplus without warrant articles such as these going into specific reserve funds. So that was the first one. The second item is the Pavement Capital Reserve Fund. Currently, we only have around $8,000 in that fund. We've used that for projects at Reeds Ferry, at Thornton's Ferry. The latest one was the parking lot at the back of Mastrocola Elementary School, and that's to the $50,000 here is to increase what's in that fund, which is pretty much depleted at this time. The next item we have is the Asbestos Abatement Capital Reserve Fund. As we looked at our last meeting, we took a little walk around the high school. That's an article that's coming up next, but this is to kind of start a reserve fund so we can take care of asbestos flooring and floor mastic in other facilities over the years, so we won't have to be to a point where we have to raise a significant amount of money to get a project finished. And the last article is the asbestos abatement at Merrimack High School. That would do all the sections that we talked about at our previous meeting, the cafeteria, not this section, but the other section, the hallway going down to the gym and the hallway going down to where the old science classrooms are in the original part of the building, and that's at $150,000. So we just have these four for your consideration this evening.
Questions or discussion from the board? Jody?
And I didn't bring any of my paperwork from the meeting when we walked through. I apologize. The $150,000, Matt, that was for everything that we looked at that night, because this part that was just in front of the cafeteria, that was $50,000, I believe, just for that part alone right there, right? So this is for everything, all the science classrooms, everything that we walked through.
Yeah, that's correct.
Further discussion or question? If I might, one of the things that I would like to have inquiry into is whether the school board should propose a warrant article that addresses or cleans up the issues that surround the budget committee that were raised this spring in the enactment. Marge, if you would, if it pleases the board, conduct an inquiry into that to see whether the district should do a bit of housekeeping measure through a warrant article. If that would be advisable, we would certainly be ready to consider that. George?
In regard to that, would now that their election will now be on our ballot? Correct.
Yes.
And that this year that'll be the staggered amount starting this year going forward, one term for 3 years, several terms for 3 years, several for 2, several for 1?
Specifically, there will be 12 positions. 4 will be 1 year, 4 will be 2 years, 4 will be 3 years. And those positions will occur on the same ballot where the positions are for school board. So we'll have all of that, all those persons elected. So that we definitely know. I think what Emily is saying is any other considerations relative to the budget committee. So it would be cleanly spelled out, where in fact some of the pieces weren't spelled out clearly. Was it an advisory committee? What kind of power did it have relative to the school board? And so does that need to be spelled out once and for all so that there wouldn't be any conjecture? And that's what we'll do, is just ask legal counsel how that might be done, or if it needs to be done.
And specifically, George, I'm just recalling the language of the special or the petitioned warrant article that said, shall the membership continue from existing? There was nothing that really defined the components, the membership terms, length of terms, and some other pieces that the attorneys and the Department of Revenue Administration raised that we validly ought to address. And if we find that no, the intent was made and we don't need to do any housekeeping, then I'd be happy with that as well. But I just don't want to find that we end up in a bind at any point down the road. Further discussion on warrant articles. Jennifer?
Matt, I'm sorry, I didn't write down under the roof reconstruction, what's in that capital reserve and what will it cost for the master?
Well, right now there's $250,000 in capital reserve. The first project we have on the CIP that was approved by the board back in September was $150,000 in 2008, 2009 for a portion of Massacola Elementary School. And then in 2011, 2012, there's a portion of Reed's Ferry School, which is really the entire school with the exception of the 97 additions that close it off.
And we don't have a
And that's
cost on that?
$250,000. That's $250,000.
We do, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, further questions, discussion from the board? Seeing none, we will move on in our agenda to the first reading of updated and new policies. Marge brings before us 3 new policies this evening: change of school or assignment policy, manifest educational hardship policy, and age of entrance policy. Marge?
And Emily, may I just ask, before I get into the reading, as regards these 4 warrant articles, would it be your intention to have a vote on these on the 16th of January? Because we need to know how the board deems these in order to be able to roll it to the budget committee. So either that would need to happen tonight, or we've got plenty of time given that we've got January 16th. So would you like that as a voting item on the 16th?
With the board's pleasure, is the 16th agreeable? Okay. We'll do that then on the 16th. Thank you, Marge.
So I have 3 policies for your consideration tonight. The first one is entitled Change of School or Assignment Policy. And I do want to say about this, in the past, it's not that we have never confronted this issue before. It's just we've not had a formal policy, and we need to have that. So this is what it says. In circumstances where the best interests of a pupil warrant a change of school or assignment, the superintendent is authorized to reassign a pupil from the public school to which he/she is currently assigned to another public school, or to approve a request from another superintendent to accept a transfer of a pupil from a school district that is not part of the SAU under the following conditions and procedures. Conditions and procedures for reassignment. First, the parents or legal guardians or superintendent of another SAU shall make a written request to the superintendent for a change of school assignment. In the request, the parents, legal guardians, shall state why the best interests of the pupil warrant a reassignment. 2. The superintendent shall fully consider this written request, shall meet with the parents or legal guardians, if necessary, and shall make a decision concerning the reassignment request. Thirdly, the superintendent's decision shall be based on the best interests of the pupil as determined by the superintendent. The superintendent may develop administrative regulations concerning the factors that will be considered in making such a determination. Fourth, if the superintendent determines that the best interests of the pupil warrant a reassignment, he/she may approve reassignment of the pupil to A, another school within the same school district, B, another school district within the same SAU, or C, a school district in another SAU, subject to the pupil meeting the admission requirements of such school and subject to the agreement of the superintendent of the receiving SAU. Fifth, the superintendent's reassignment decision shall be in writing and shall be final and binding. Sixth, the total reassignments or transfers made under this policy in any one school year shall not exceed 1% of the average daily membership in residence of a school district, or 5% of the average daily membership in residence of any single school, whichever is greater. Seventh, reassignments under this policy, which exceed the percentages provided in number 6 above, must have the prior written approval of the school board. Count of reassigned pupils, tuition payment and rate, and transportation. Pupils reassigned under this policy shall be counted in the average daily membership in residence of a given pupil's resident school district. Said pupil's resident district shall forward any tuition payment due to the district to which said pupil was assigned. The superintendents involved in the reassignment of a pupil shall jointly establish a tuition rate for each such pupil. Some or all of the tuition may be waived by the superintendent of the receiving district for good cause shown, or pursuant to any applicable policy or policies of the receiving district, presuming said action is not contrary to law. The cost of transportation for any pupil reassigned under this policy shall be the sole responsibility of the parent legal guardian. Role of Department of Education. The superintendent of the pupil's resident SAU shall notify the Department of Education within 30 days of any reassignment made under this policy. Manifest educational hardship, change of assignment. When parents, legal guardians believe that an initial assignment has been made which will result in a manifest educational hardship to the pupil, said parents, legal guardians may seek a change of assignment in accordance with RSA 193:3, Roman numerals 1 and 2, and policy blank, manifest educational hardship. You will see that a blank is listed there for if and when the board approves the manifest educational hardship policy, the letters that designate that policy will be placed on that line. If I could just go back and say, I found a typo already, and so in the right before role of Department of Education, the typo, it said role, it should say sole responsibility, so I just read it as such. You probably found that as I was reading. Okay? Any questions about this policy as it stands? It might be one of those that you want to take under advisement and look at between now and January 16th. I will tell you that I have done a change of assignment within the district, perhaps from one elementary school to another for what I considered very good reasons, and the parent has been responsible for the transportation. So it doesn't happen often, very infrequently, but it has happened in the past.
Rose?
Earlier in the year, we had a situation where we had a student that was out of district that wanted to be tuitioned in, and that would also fall under these guidelines. I thought about that as you read it.
Correct.
And
We
where
have
it had tuition involved.
We have not only that, but we also have the board policy that was just approved for non-resident students, and you've already passed that. So we have some policies that overlap. What it's trying to do is provide good guidance for the superintendent, who by law is responsible for placement of students, to have very specifically what has to be done when a parent makes a request such as this, so that you know exactly how to operate. And like I said, they are very infrequent, but when it happens, it's good to have a policy in place so you know how to operate.
Marge, how do we currently report to the Department of Education in circumstances such as this?
We report in the case of a request that we've had, it would be the superintendent of the sending school that would report that in fact this change has been made. And now with student identification numbers, they're much better tracked, because with the state assessment, we are tracking students as they go from one place to another. So we have reported, again, it happens so infrequently that it has been just between the two superintendents to make sure the Department of Education knows it.
Okay, thank you.
So the second policy plays right into this one. This one is called the Manifest Educational Hardship Policy, and this is the one that was referred to, and this is what it says. Resident students of the district shall be assigned to a public school within the district by the superintendent or his or her designee. The board recognizes that in unusual and extraordinary circumstances, parents or guardians may wish to request a change of assignment to another public school within the district or a public school in another district. When the parents or guardians believe that the assignment which has been made will result in a manifest educational hardship to the student, the board will consider these requests according to the procedure outlined below. Procedure for consideration of a manifest educational hardship request. The following procedures will be utilized where a parent or guardian seeks a change of assignment within the district or a waiver of assignment from attending any school in the district based on an assertion that the current assignment constitutes a manifest educational hardship. Number one, the parent or guardian shall make a written request through the superintendent's office detailing the specific reasons why they believe that the current assignment constitutes a manifest educational hardship. Any such written request shall be made by the parents or guardians within 15 days of the assignment made by the superintendent or his or her designee. Secondly, the board will schedule a time at a regular board meeting held within 30 days of receipt of the written request of the parents or guardians to hear the parents or guardians' request. At such time, the parents or guardians may address the board. The board will hear the parents or guardians' request in non-public session, subject to the right of the parents or guardians to have the matter heard in public session under RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2C. Third, the parents or guardians of the student may use whatever information which they deem is appropriate to support their request. At a minimum, however, the parents or guardians must submit information demonstrating to the school board that the current assignment is detrimental or has a negative effect on the student. 4. In determining whether the current assignment of the student constitutes a manifest educational hardship and what the corresponding appropriate action should be, which may include, but not be limited to, assignment to a public school in another district, the board shall consider all information given it by the parents or guardians, the recommendations of the superintendent, and any other information which the board deems relevant and useful. 5, the board reserves the legal right to make a determination on whether a given request constitutes a manifest educational hardship and what the corresponding action should be on a case-by-case basis. 6, the board will render its decision in writing within 15 days after the board meeting in which the parents or guardians addressed the board and will forward its written decision to the parents or guardians via U.S. mail. 7, if a parent or guardian is aggrieved by the decision of the board, he/she may appeal to the State Board of Education in accordance with the provisions of Ed 200. So, again, this particular policy would really say that a parent who was wanting to have a change of placement would really have to show very concretely why that was so, and would have to show how it's impacting their educational performance. So once again, it's not that you get a lot of these requests, but it's when you get one, how do you deal with it? And that's why you have it in place for the one or two that you might get.
Okay, other questions from the board? Okay.
And the last one is age of entrance. A student may enter grade 1 if his/her chronological age will be 6 before September 30 of the year of entering school. A student may enter kindergarten if his or her chronological age will be 5 before September 30 of the year of entering school. A birth certificate must be presented upon registration as proof of the date of birth. Incoming transfer students in grades 2 through 8 inclusive will be initially placed in accordance with the data forwarded by the sending district. Such placement is tentative and subject to reassignment by the superintendent of schools or his or her designee. Incoming transfer students in grade 1 will only be initially admitted to grade 1 if their chronological age will be 6 before December 31st of the year of entering school, or if previously enrolled in grade 1 in another community and attending local schools only on a temporary basis, that is 10 months or less. Such placement is tentative and subject to reassignment by the superintendent of schools.
Questions from the board? Jody?
I'm wondering if you could explain to me in language that I can understand. The last paragraph?
The last paragraph has to do with if a first grader is coming, let's say, from a state outside of New York, they might be chronologically younger than what the policy states. But if they were already enrolled in a school system and they had put in 2 or 3 months of school, then you would allow them to come in because they were already enrolled in school. So the age has less to do with it than, I mean, it's the idea of the placement. They are already enrolled, and rather than deny them the entrance, that's what it has to do with 10 months or less. So this isn't to do
I guess
with
what
promotion.
confuses me is the attending on a temporary basis 10 months or less. I don't understand the placement of that wording.
It means that they hadn't put in a full year of first grade, and they're going through it again. They were already enrolled in another public school, and they had spent some time in the school. They had spent 10 months or less. 10 months would be considered to be a year. Okay? So they put some time in, so you would automatically receive them because they were already in the first grade.
And why do they only address grades 2 through 8? Is there a reason for that? And the incoming transfer students in grades 2 through 8 inclusive?
I think its real focus here has to do with, if you will, K through 8, elementary, I mean ninth grade. It's not an issue. Is that not true?
Right, because when they get into high school, they're placed into classes that they've taken, and they may be, for instance, half in ninth, half in 10th.
Jennifer?
Is there a reason why it's it's different, the chronological age for a transfer student versus a student entering before December 30th, or the chronological age for a transfer student will be 6 before December 31st.
It's simply because you've got students coming from different states with different laws and so on, and so this just states what the law is for New Hampshire. So it's trying to define so that when someone comes from out of state, you've got some guidelines for placement. That's the reason. Because this is not just within New Hampshire. I mean, we've got students coming from many different places.
Is it a New Hampshire law to be 6 for the first grade before
Yes.
September 30th?
Correct.
That's in New Hampshire, that's a state law.
In fact, you see the reference, the RSA 191:1,
Yes.
and the compulsory attendance. And we've now put in the kindergarten piece because we have kindergarten, so that's an important piece to list as well,
Right.
even though that's not compulsory.
Okay, thank you.
George?
On a different note, do we have a policy about a student coming into the district that would be maybe too old on the other end of the spectrum? Is there a policy to that?
No, the only other policy that we have to do that has anything to do with entrance is an early admissions policy, and I have that coming up for you to take a look at about whether we're going to keep the early admissions policy or not keep it. So first was taking a look at just the standardization of your entry in, because the compulsory age in New Hampshire is 6 in first grade, because not every school system has kindergarten. If you're going to have kindergarten, it's important to make that statement as well, but we don't have any other reference to entrance.
Has that ever been an issue that has come before you,
No,
where you had an age? Okay.
No.
So there's probably not a need for it then.
not at this point. I mean, it would be an aberration,
Not
but
yet.
if you, not yet, but if you ask me, have I
I'm just
confronted
saying,
that?
because we've seen some
Sure.
things that have been interesting.
Oh, sure,
throughout the
absolutely,
years.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
But to that point, it just brings something up. Is that something that perhaps we should add to this policy, that there should be some sort of a timeline between the ages of 6 before September 30th, just so you're not getting a 7 or an 8-year-old in a first grade classroom? How does that work?
I think where the superintendent is responsible, again, by law for placement, you use that, whatever the sending school is giving you for data to try and help you in making a placement decision as well as doing your own assessment. And so I see where you're offering it up, as there might be that eventuality, but given that it hasn't been something that we've confronted in my 6 years, or prior to that, I was the assistant superintendent for 13 and spent a lot of time with placement, and I've just not seen it happen. It's certainly something, Jennifer, that I could check with the New Hampshire School Boards Association on whether that's been an issue anywhere else. But it just hasn't seemed to be something that would need to be addressed. What I really want the board to address after this is the early admissions. I mean, that is something that I need the board's thought on, because that deviates from this. And it's what do you want to do about that? Continue with the policy you've got or make an adjustment? That I do need guidance on. But because we've got 2 more meetings to go with this, why don't I just find out what the profile of the state is in other districts? I mean, to see, that's the beauty of dealing with the New Hampshire School Boards Association, is we get a broader viewpoint.
Yeah, I was thinking not only for transfers, but also just for, initial entrance into first grade or kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
Some parents feel that their child's not ready to start yet, so they hold them back, and then, they're a little bit older than the others in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me just go that step.
I think for consideration too, Jennifer, because education in grades 1 through 12 is compulsory everywhere in the country, it's not as much of an issue. You may have a student who came from another school district who was retained, but you would have that documentation, and the recommendation would go to the superintendent to have a retention. And I think too that Marge raised the point with the open, or the early admission. We had it for 6th grade, now that, first grade for 6-year-olds. Now that we're looking at kindergarten, the policy that we had doesn't address that, but that would certainly be some points for consideration when we look at the next policy. Jody?
Well, personally, I was just going to speak to, other school districts within the state and other states in the country, you're going to find their compulsory entrance age is pretty similar. It's going to vary by a few months. It's not going to vary by years. And if a child is older due to being retained, I personally would be concerned about having a policy that would prevent that child from being in the academically appropriate grade level for that child. Where the early admissions I have an interest in, because I see some room possibly for movement with that. But I can't imagine a child being too old as being an issue that policy would need to address personally.
Further questions, discussion? Seeing none, we will look at our second review of this policy at our meeting on the 16th. Okay, this brings us to other. Is there any correspondence to come before the board this evening? Seeing none, are there any comments to come before the board? Seeing none, is there, I'm sorry, Jennifer?
I just realized this. Perhaps this should come under new business, I'm not sure, but I know a couple of times, just as in regards to getting the packets today where we didn't have them, I picked mine up this morning, but I didn't have time to go through all of the minutes, which was why, a reason for my abstention on the last two. And I know there have been a couple other times when I've either had to come and get them because I didn't get them on time. Is there a way to streamline that at all? I couldn't print out over 100 pages of...
I think that's what the hope was, that if we also had it going out by email, if a packet didn't arrive, the hope was that one would be able to go online, see everything except for non-public. Little did we realize that we were going to be passing out probably packets that ranged from 50 pages to 100 pages. So I think back when we came online with email, that was the hope. We were trying to solve that issue. What the problem is that in the past, it's been advantageous for us to take the packets to the Manchester branch of the post office, because then we're assured that they're going to come back the next day. And when you put them in the mail in Merrimack, everything goes to Manchester and comes back. So that's worked for us pretty well. When we have reports coming from numbers of places, it's not always that we have everything in place on Thursday to go out, and that's why there's sometimes the overhang, if you will, to Friday. And what we're trying not to do is have a lot of separate mailings, so you have the bulk of the packet go out on Thursday, and then you have separate things going out on Friday and Saturday. We're trying to do one massive mailing. So I think this is time for New Year's resolutions, and so I think we're going to see what we can do, to your point, to streamline. But I was disappointed to think that with them being hand-carried on Friday afternoon to Manchester, that for whatever reason, we'll call it the Day of Mourning, the National Day of Mourning, plus the New Year's Day, that we had the lag. So I apologize for that. We'll just try and do better.
No, I didn't mean I didn't mean to be critical about it.
Right.
I'm just, my
trying
point
to help
was,
it.
yeah, that
Right.
I know there have been a couple of times when I've seen, in my email that we've brought it up to the post office, please let me know if I don't get it, and I'm usually, I don't know if I'm the only one, but that doesn't get it on time, so I've gone to pick it up, another packet in the office. So just a thought that it certainly hurt tonight anyways.
Right, well, especially with 4 sets of minutes.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'd add, too, we had a board member a couple years ago who would just make it a habit of picking up the packet on Friday, save the district postage, and, ensure that she had it for the weekend, to not even mess with the what-ifs or possibilities. So that's always an option to any of the board members. And certainly, to let Sandy know so that... George?
Marge, the district office is open past 5, correct? Usually somebody's kicking around a little bit later.
You will
I know
normally,
you guys put in a lot of hours.
you will normally find the light on.
Okay. If possible, what I will attempt to do is stop on my way from work on Friday, rather than have it, because I always seem to get it Monday.
Yes?
So I have to read it like between, and
Like 2 hours and
I've had
count,
some
yeah.
issues with PDFs opening. You know, I'll try and fix that on my end. But tonight it was like Jennifer said, a little tough because
Sure.
4 packets of minutes and several.
Oh,
other
it's a
pages.
lot. It was a lot of paper.
So a lot of information tonight. Yeah, and if possible, I would try to pick it up also, because I seem to get mine like the day of the meeting, so
Okay.
that would be helpful to me too.
Good.
Okay, other new business to come before the board? Jody?
Matt might have to help me with some of the wording on this. Through our budget deliberations, I've had some discussions with some other board members too. I've had a lot of, we've had a lot of input from the public. We've had a lot of questions from the public, and some of the questions were recurring. They were asked over and over and over again, and I felt some of them were very important questions, and some of the information we have touched upon in some of our meetings. Some of it I think possibly would warrant being repeated, possibly go into more detail, and I was wondering if we could get sort of an item on the agenda, a presentation, if you will, with just some definitions. One of the questions I got over and over and over again was, what is the default budget? How is the default budget number comprised? You know, where does the number come from? How is it different than the budget that the school board proposes, if at all? And what is the implication for the voters to either vote for or against the school board's budget, or for or against the default budget come voting time? I think almost every single person that contacted me asked me that question, and I tried to explain the default budget as well as I could, but my opinion is Matt is the expert and probably would be better to answer those questions. That was one of them. The other question I had raised to me was, what is a level service budget and what is a levelly funded budget? What are the differences? People were asking me that repeatedly because that was lingo that we throw around that a lot of people didn't understand. I think we probably discussed it at one point in time, but if we had it all explained at once. And then I had a lot of questions regarding the surplus. And basically, where does the surplus come from? How does that work? How do we figure the surplus in with our budgeting numbers, and how is it returned? Because we had brought up the fact that surplus, it's different than the town government. We have to return the surplus back to the taxpayers as tax relief. So any kind of specific information that you think people who aren't around budgeting information all the time, something that the taxpayers or the voters, people watching at home, could possibly understand, if we could put something on the agenda to identify and explain a little educational information regarding those subjects. Matt?
Yeah, sure. Between the RSAs and a little handout that the Department of Revenue Administration puts together, suggested wording for warrant articles, there's a lot of information that I can kind of extract out, and I can probably put together something fairly comprehensive, but still kind of clear and simplistic, so everybody can kind of get it without using a lot of jargon, if you give me a chance at that.
And could we do that in a timely manner so that people, because I know a lot of people are asking questions about the deliberative session too, and the mechanics about the deliberative session, mechanics about the budget committee process. People are very interested in the budget process. And I figure if we could possibly, while the budget process is in motion and before the deliberative session, we could have that information presented.
Marge?
The board has 3 scheduled meetings, at least 3, if not 4, now that I'm thinking about it. There is, of course, the one on the 16th of January, then there's one on February 5th, and one on February 19th, and then the first Monday in March. So I think the thing is, it's just a matter of pulling it together. Maybe another way of doing it is to do it in parts also. I mean, you asked a number of questions, so perhaps we could do a small piece on the 16th and then another on the 5th and so on, and just inform over a period of time rather than a one fell swoop. Would you be kind enough to just pass off to us again all the questions that you've gotten? We'll amass those together, because I was copying down too, and I just want to make sure we got the essence, and then we'll try and put together a presentation, or presentations. No, just before the next meeting.
Thank you.
No, I think that that's a good idea, Jody, especially, I mean, we're all in the business of education, and educating the voters is the responsibility of all of us. So I think that anything that we can get out there in a timely fashion would certainly be to the benefit of the people in Merrimack. Other new business to come before the board this evening? I would like to add potential for a recurring agenda item over the next couple of months, and it ties in a little bit with what Jody had just referred to. I pulled the meeting minutes from January 2nd, 2006, so a full year ago. It seems history's repeated itself with us. In particular, I found that Chairman Coleman acknowledged that it's difficult to make judgments about programs during the budget time. Some of the responses that we received through email said, you only think about the budget during budget time, when in reality, I think we went to great lengths this spring, certainly, to have mini-budget workshops and be more proactive in the way that we approach the budget this year. But there are some recurring items. People are suggesting different ways that perhaps we could cut costs or consolidate services. And I'd like to just propose that under an agenda item that might be entitled something like Address of Budget Concerns and Correspondence, that we raise different items. What I've done in some of the emails that I pulled together, things that come up repeatedly are items like insurance, athletics, consolidating building programs, reviewing of course offerings, analysis of the software that the district uses. And at least if we were to address a few of these at each meeting and get sort of a handle on what the district has done in that capacity, so that we're informed and we're able to say to people, yes, we have addressed it in this timeline, or a committee reviewed that and was heard by the board. At least we'd have that background, again, so that we can educate the public and the constituents who are really trying to pay close attention to what the board does and be supportive of our endeavors. So, Marge, if you take that under advisement, I would be happy to. George?
Perhaps if we did them like a punch list or a task item list, and addressed them with, and checked them off. Okay, this was looked at, we reviewed it, this is what our finding was, type of a thing, and presented that, and with that material that we did examine what the request was it feasible, and if it was, this is how we can implement it. If it's not feasible, this is why it wasn't. Mm-hmm. Something like that, some type of a punch list or a task list.
Exactly. I'm not thinking, though, of presenting it all in one night. I mean,
No, I think you should break it into sections that we can manage, because we do have a lot of other things on the plate.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you. Any other new business to come before the board? Seeing none, are there any committee reports to come before the board? Rose?
The Healthcare Containment Committee met just previous to the winter break, and we're also meeting again this week. And they will be coming before the board in the next month or two? February. And so we've been doing lots of exciting work and looking at and discussing directions to go. And so I just wanted to let you know that we're working at a very feverish pace to come up with, some things to report to you, back to everyone.
Any further committee reports? I'll report that the Budget Committee met on the 21st of December. In that time, there is a vacancy that has opened. Stan Heinrich did send out a notification that the request for any interested citizen, you must be a registered voter here in Merrimack. If you are interested in filling that vacancy, you may submit a letter of intent, and the letters of intent will be reviewed on the 10th of January, which is their next meeting, and that vacancy is to be filled at once. Any further committee reports to come before the board? Seeing none, we'll open the microphone to public comments on agenda items. Any of the members of the public that would like to speak this evening? Seeing none, we will take a moment to sign the manifest. I would like to entertain a motion to go into non-public session per RSA. Marge, it's not written down here. 91A dash 3 colon Roman numeral 2, A, B, and C. Although, I'm sorry, on a roll call. So moved by Jennifer, second by George. George, how do you vote? In favor. Jennifer? In favor. Jody? In favor. Rose? In favor. And the chair votes in favor. We will take a 5-minute recess to clear the room.
she may be weary. Them young girls, they do get wearied wearing that when she gets weary, try a little tenderness, yeah, yeah. Oh, man, that. You know she's waiting, just anticipating for things that she'll never, 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 never possess, yeah, yeah. But while she's there waiting, and without them, try a little tenderness. That's all you gotta do. It's not just sentimental, no, no, no. She has her grief and care.